Hi, I'm Julia. Um, you are the data entry group of folks, correct? All right. And we are going to sort of talk about, I mean, data entry in and of itself is pretty boring, but we're going to talk about sort of the fun parts around it and what it can lead to, and just some ways to make sure everything goes smoothly. Cool. I'm going to start sharing my screen and walking through this presentation. Let's see. Do you guys see my screen? Thumbs up? Cool. All right. Throw in the Zoom chat. I'll walk through, when I'm walking through the examples, I want to know if it's going to be more helpful to use like Google Sheets or to use Excel. So if you have used either of those before, if you have access to them on your computer, just like throw in chat which one you use, Google Sheets or Excel, or if you're somehow a numbers person, which is like the Mac version. So we're going to talk about manually entering data, which is like the super boring part. But then we're also going to talk about like different file formats for data. So we're going to talk about what different formats look like, what they mean, how to pronounce them, and then how to import different file formats into, say, Excel or into Sheets. We're going to go over some of the questions that you can ask yourself when you get access to data and you're trying to sort of like figure out what it means. And then I'll show you a couple of tools that you can use to summarize data to sort of figure out the interesting points. And then sometimes data is it's called like dirty data, or data has like bad hygiene, or like there's like things in the data that are going to make it really hard for you to analyze it or for somebody else to analyze it. And so there's some things that you can do to make sure that the data is ready to be handled. So we'll go over a little bit of that. Before we dive in, I would love to sort of like, it's a small enough group, I would love to like hear from you and like where you are and what you're up to. So let's just go sort of in order that folks came into the room. Kioma, is that how you pronounce it?
It's Chioma. It's a
Kioma,
hard
okay,
name.
sorry.
Hi, everyone. I'm here in East Lansing, Michigan at Michigan State University, but I'm from California, so I moved all the way out here to go to grad school. I went to San Jose State and got my bachelor's of science in journalism, really into politics, and I'm now really into environmental journalism too. So that's me. And I love squirrels.
Squirrels are awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I am currently at the University of Colorado Boulder. A little background about myself is I studied Spanish, did a undergrad and graduate degree in Spanish, town journalism. So now I'm pursuing a degree in it. This is one of my internships. I'm interested also in environmental journalism. And yeah, that's about it.
Cool. Thank you. Let's see, Cam.
Yeah, hopefully this works and doesn't go haywire. My name is Cam Rodriguez. I am currently in Chicago, Illinois. I've lived in the Chicago area my entire life, and I am studying data journalism, geography, and GIS at DePaul University, so right in the heart of Chicago. I am pretty involved with our student magazine. I'm managing editor, love contributing to local journalism in Chicago, and I'm really interested in the way that industry and development interplays with nature. So kind of environmental justice, environmental pollution and contamination, things like that. So
Cool, thank you. Let's see, Luke.
Be me, yeah. Hey everybody, I'm coming from to you from Raleigh, North Carolina, where I'm a student at NC State University studying environmental engineering there. But I'm extremely passionate about journalism, and that's the field that I'm looking to going to. Definitely for me, data has been really cool way to bridge both journalism and the engineering background.
Nice. There's like a lot of common interests between this group. It's great to see. All right. I'm going to, can you tell me how to pronounce your name?
Don't worry. My name is Mayasal, and I am a senior at the University of Utah, based in Salt Lake City, which is where the VP debate will be hosted tonight. And I am currently studying political science with an emphasis in international relations. But I will be graduating with also a qualitative analysis certificate as well. And I am obviously interested in data journalism. I think that though is dramatically shifting and changing on like what that technically means, because we kind of see that obviously, data journalism isn't really confined to only data journalism. That is still a thing among, higher tier, or not higher tier, but where newsrooms can afford data, slew of data journalists. And so I'm interested in investigative reporting is kind of my interest. In terms of beats, I really like labor and sort of reporting on economy using data tools and sort of how that operates. So cool.
Good to hear all of you and your different areas of interest. I am located in Chicago, also downtown. I live in South Loop, so near some of the DePaul campus stuff. My background is in journalism. I worked for some local newsrooms in Missouri and Colorado, and then I moved up to national newsrooms. I worked at Politico, and then I worked at the Wall Street Journal. And then I went to go work at Hearken. And Hearken is sort of one of the groups that is bringing this group together. And now I have left Hearken to work on my master's degree in applied data science, just because I wanted to get a little bit more data chops before going back into the workforce. So that's my background. I'm also into environmental journalism. I was the vice president of the campus sustainability organization in my undergrad. So I see that there's a lot of storytelling that we could be doing in that area. And there's a lot of data that we could work with, especially connecting to the GIS work and even connecting to the labor stuff. There's a lot. Anyway. So you have had a few trainings so far, and so I feel like you have some sense of what election night could look like in a newsroom, but what questions do you have in general about what's it like that week, that day, the next day? Any questions that you have about that? I've been in newsrooms on a couple of elections nights and happy to share experiences if you just want to start there.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what the experience is of that night and how it sort of moves over into the next day, and how you figure out what angle you're going to take with the stories going forward. Yeah.
So the day of election day is usually super boring until about 6 or 7 p.m. People are just waiting around, trying to see if anything exciting is going to happen. You don't want anything exciting to happen because that's not good. You want it to sort of be boring until it's a little bit later in the day. You might get some exit polling, but I think that's going to be less of a thing this year since there's so much early voting by mail. And also just because people are not going to want to be exit pollers or talk to exit pollers because it's risky. Anyway, so there probably won't be a ton of stuff coming in necessarily during the day, but once the polls start closing and an hour or two after the polls start closing is when you start getting the big waves of data coming in. And there are going to be certain people in each newsroom who sort of know what they're looking for. So what particular races, what particular precincts are they curious about? What do they think is going to signal how things might turn out somewhere in a different state or a different county that's similar. And so there are going to be people who are looking for really particular data points that are coming in, and there's going to be other people who are more interested in the big picture, how is it looking overall? Is turnout better or worse than we were expecting? Are we getting results faster or slower? Are we getting mail-in ballots counted as quickly as we were expecting. So there's different people in the newsroom who are going to be interested in different parts of the data as it's coming in. I think one of the like things that I didn't anticipate was there was a year when I didn't have anything necessarily I needed to do at Politico on election night because I was working like the morning before and the morning after, but I wanted to be in the newsroom. So I was just like, tell me whatever would be useful. And it ended up being my job is to look up how to pronounce people's names so that when the reporters went on TV or went on radio, they didn't pronounce people's names incorrectly. So sometimes you just like do whatever. like, and it was a lot of just like trying to find a place where the candidate had introduced themselves on a YouTube video or on a radio interview so I could like hear how they pronounced it because that's going to be my best reference. So sometimes you just get asked to do interesting, weird things to help everybody else. And then in terms of like how things work for the next day. So ahead of election night, people pre-write a lot of stories. So there's going to be a pre-written story for like if this person wins or if this person wins, if this ballot initiative passes, if this doesn't. There's going to be a lot of like pre-written material that they're just going to like pop the numbers into and hit go because they know what it means. But there's going to be other stories that were not anticipated. There's going to be like this group of people, it looks like voted for this candidate or this issue in a way that we weren't expecting. So we're going to assign out a reporter to sort of go talk to people and try to figure out why that was. So as the results come in, there's going to be some story idea generation and sort of jotting down what stories do we need to assign to people. And then editors will probably assign those out overnight or the next morning. And then also if you see something interesting, like everyone's brains will find different interesting things and you should feel free to like raise up that you found something interesting or that you're curious about why XYZ is the way it is. So yeah, I mean, journalists are never going to be upset at another journalist's curiosity. Like, so cool. Sorry, my cat is deciding to meow. Yeah, so like election day is pretty boring. Election night is like, it gets like more and more hectic as the night goes on because at the beginning you're only paying attention to the states where the polls have closed. So you're only needing to worry about like 10 or 15 states, but then, you know, a few hours later you have 48 states where the polls have closed and numbers are coming in. And you may not have 100% of the precincts for the East Coast ones in yet. And so then you're like, okay, I have like 90% of the data in for these states, and I have 50% of the data in for these states, and I only have 10% of the data in for these states. And you're just like, there's a lot of like variation between where the status is of everything. So it gets crazier as the night goes on. By the next day, some states may already be at 100% precincts reporting, and that's nice because then you can sort of like clear those off your plate and focus on the states that are still trickling in. And I think especially this year, where there are some states that aren't letting people count the mail-in ballots until after the polls close on election night, and so they have to like run all of those ballots through the printer or through the scanner, and it goes really slowly. So it may be a couple of days. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear my cat, but she's like circling. Okay, what are you guys worried about on election night? Or in whatever, like if you're working with places the weeks before the election or the weeks after the election, like what are you worried about?
I sort of have like a quick kind of question in terms and kind of putting it in as well as my worries is that I've been reading a lot of like political analysis pieces about like how people are projecting that this won't be necessarily an election night where it kind of is decided like here and there, like here's the winner or who's technically the winner for this night. It will be more of an election week because of course the pandemic is going to have an uptick of mail-in ballots. And so I'm just kind of curious because that's kind of my concern where it's like, obviously I really wouldn't know, like, I'm just wondering how I would possibly kind of approach like election night. Of course, you know, what I just learned is like, okay, I can have a sense of like how I would operate on election night and doing in terms of coverage, but how would I in helping out? But if this is going to be an election night, who knows how long it'll be drawn out. What should I probably prepare for is probably my question and worry.
Yeah. So I think election night is still going to be the busiest time just because all 50 states and all of the precincts in all 50 states are starting to give you information. And then like a day later, it may be that everybody is still giving you some information, but at least you have like started moving you sort of have a sense of where this stuff is coming from, what stuff is starting to look like. And by like 2 or 3 days later, some of the states, or at least some of the precincts, should be at 100% reporting. And so it will sort of slow down in craziness, even if it ramps up in intensity, even if it's like really, really close. And so 4 days out, we still don't know who won, but at least we know who won in 80% of the counties in the country or something. So there's still like, you have information, you're learning a lot about how people voted, what they care about, even if you don't necessarily have like the answer of like who won, you at least like know you're learning a lot about people, and there's a lot of stories that can be told and that can be uncovered from the data that has come in that is complete. I think it's going to be interesting to see if people try to challenge results in any states. That's another place where it can sort of get crazy again, is if it's really close and then like 3 or 4 days later, a candidate says like, I'm only behind by 1%, I'm going to challenge the results and ask for a recount. Then you sort of like go back to square one a little bit with that location. But again, like I think because everybody starts giving you results on election night, it's craziest on election night, and then it'll sort of slow down as the week goes on. Does that help? Okay, cool. Other stuff folks are worried about?
I guess a question I have is, I'm not concerned because I think I do keep up with political news, especially in the Midwest, pretty well, and Politico definitely helps. But being in and from Illinois, I worry that I will need to take a little time to get accustomed to, because I'm paired with the Detroit Free Press, so getting accustomed to Michigan voter laws and Michigan, at least specifically Detroit politics. Do you have any recommendations to kind of getting acclimated to a different state's system?
I think as you are getting settled in, look for friendly reporters, and then look for reporters who you think are going to be sort of reporting on these issues, and just search their past bylines, look for the stories they've written, and see if they've written stories that can sort of answer your questions. And if you don't see a story that they've already written that sort of explains something, feel free to just like ask them. People are nice for the most part. I think the other thing, so there's a group called NICAR, which is the National Institute of Computer Assisted Reporters. And so that's where a lot of the data journalists hang out. And they have a national conference every year. And so there's some resources there, but you could also sort of look at whether there's local NICAR chapters or people who speak at NICAR who happen to be from Michigan. Because those are people who are used to sort of talking about like how election results tend to come in, or look for somebody who may have worked at that paper before in the past. Does that help? I know it's like, it's so tricky because like the voter laws keep changing, and like you can try to read the Secretary of State's website in most states, but it's not going to be as helpful as talking to a human.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think it definitely will be just like trying to communicate as much as possible within the newsroom and being like, this is the experience I have. Like, give me your hot button issues for Detroit outside of what I've already researched. So
yeah, you can ask somebody like, what's the most interesting thing about how XYZ? So like, what's the most interesting thing about how Michigan handles absentee ballots? What's the most interesting thing about what happens when the polls stay open late? Like, you can sort of like frame it in that way so that somebody's like, oh, what is interesting, and not just like, help me. So sometimes it's just like framing the question a little bit differently to make it feel warmer. Cool. All right. I'm going to keep going, but as you guys have questions or as you think of things that you're worried about, feel free to speak up. Also, you can like throw questions in chat at any time. I have it like open in my window so I can see it. Okay. Oh, yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to spend one slide on this, which is like, what happens if like by data entry, they literally meant you're going to be sitting there with a phone and writing numbers down? Like, how do you do that really well? So there's a reason that this might happen, which is that in certain precincts or in certain county clerk's offices, they may allow a journalist to be in the room as an observer, along with the observers as the ballots are being counted, and be there when the person like calls the numbers into the like central office to like say like, this is how many votes for each of these people we have from this precinct. And so the journalist may be in the room and may be able to like essentially overhear that phone call, write down those numbers, and then call the newsroom and read those numbers to the newsroom so that we get them at the same time as the official like state office gets the numbers. So that's how it happens sometimes, that you end up with like needing to verbally convey numbers from one place to another. If it's possible, you can always just ask the reporter, like, can you also take a photo of the piece of paper that this guy is hand holding and text it to me? And it may be that he doesn't have signal, and maybe that like she can't access the Wi-Fi, maybe that the person in charge isn't going to let them take a photo, but you can always ask them to like also take a photo. But in terms of speed, verbal is really fast. So when you're on the phone, you can always ask them to go really slowly, ask them to repeat themselves. Once you get numbers down, read the numbers back to them. And then like repeat this whole process again. Like you really want to make sure that these numbers are right. And it's going to be a lot faster if you go slowly now than if you need to call them back later to verify something. And then also when you're looking at the numbers, like I know you may not know a lot about these races, you may not know a lot about these issues or these locations, but ask yourself, like, does this make sense? Like if you write down like 800 and something and 400 and something, and then you have 30 something, like ask yourself, like, does it make sense for this to be 30 something? Or maybe was this 300 or 3000? Like, let me verify with the reporter that this is correct. If you are moving numbers from one place to another place in a written form, so let's say like your job is to look at the Secretary of State's website and copy and paste numbers from there on into like a newsroom's content management system, like into an article to just like update that. The best thing you can do is copy and paste. That's the lowest chance of introducing error. If you're going to copy and paste, the highest chance for error is that you like accidentally trim off the first digit or the last digit when you're highlighting. So just always double check that. That's one of the reasons why like reading the number out loud is helpful, because when you read it out loud, it's forcing you to think a little bit more about the whole number. I find it helpful if I'm copying and pasting from something into a newsroom CMS to like try to put the windows side by side on my laptop rather than like one in front of the other, just so that I can see where I'm going all the time. And then if possible, I like to highlight numbers. So like if I am putting numbers in, I like turn the highlight on. So like as I'm pasting, everything is highlighted. And then as I go through and verify numbers, I like unhighlight them once I've double checked them. You can set up whatever system you want. You can make it be bold, you can make it be italics, whatever it is, just some way that you can sort of like verify it for yourself. Like, yes, I've double checked this number. This is in fact what it says. And again, just looking at numbers and being like, does this make sense? Because not only like is it possible that like we can make mistakes as journalists, but it's also possible that like the county clerk's office might have made a mistake. It's very possible that somebody could have like transposed a number when they were typing it in on their end. And so sometimes it's helpful to be like, this doesn't make sense. I think we should check with them before publishing this. So those are my tips for just like, if you get stuck with typing numbers as your task. Anybody have any other things that they've done? Have anybody had data entry jobs in the past where, I don't know, like if you've been a cashier or something else where you're like typing numbers all day and you need to make sure that they're right. Cool. All right. All right, now I'm going to move into like more fun data things, because I assume if you're in data entry that you actually like are more interested in doing more about data than just typing numbers. So I don't know if you're going to get to use this stuff on election night, but I wanted to cover it just in case. So there are different kind of file formats that you're likely to get election results in. Some places do PDFs. Some places do PDFs that are literally just scans of spreadsheets. And so it's an image and you can't copy and paste from it, and it's terrible. Hence the puke emoji. So sometimes PDFs are bad, sometimes PDFs are good. But one of the things about PDFs is they can contain both text and images. And you can open a PDF with a lot of different tools. A .txt, so a text file, just contains text, no images, and it can be opened in a lot of different kind of text editors. Text files, have you guys ever heard the term comma delimited before? Okay, I'll show you guys a comma delimited file shortly, but basically that means that where there would be a break between columns in the spreadsheet, they've put a comma in. And so the text, like each column is broken apart by a comma. So that way, when you bring it into a spreadsheet program, it'll just take all of the commas out and break everything into different cells based on the commas. Similarly, some text files are tab delimited. So the one that we're gonna use today is tab delimited. Also, yes, I see the comments about tabula in terms of when you get a PDF that's an image and you need to like try to pull the numbers out. Cool. So text files, they're just text. You're gonna need to tell whatever spreadsheet system you're putting it into, like, how do you read this? Like, how are you gonna separate this big block of text into being different rows and columns? So another one that's really similar to .txt is .csv. So this is just a text file that has the commas specifically separating each of them. .tsv just stands for tab separated. So tab separated, tab delimited mean the same thing. Comma delimited, comma separated, they mean the same thing. .xls, X, I meant to have an X after that, or .xls are the file formats for Excel. A surprising number of like official government places put things out in Excel formats, even though it's like a proprietary software. They still put them out in Excel rather than doing something more generic like a text file. And then the last one here is JSON. So JSON is most commonly used by some place like the AP, which is like putting out election results like every minute over the course of election night. And so it's just like updating. And so you're not likely to need to handle a JSON file, but I do have an example on the next page just so that you can get a sense for what it looks like and how to sort of navigate it. And if you do need to double check a number that's in a JSON file. All right. So you don't need to look at these right now, but these are all just examples of actual like election related data that's in each of these different formats. So PDF from California and Louisiana, Kentucky did text file, FEC uses a CSV, Minnesota uses an XLS, and then here's a JSON. I'm just gonna click on, how do I move this? I'm having trouble clicking on the link. There we go. Okay, do you guys see a lot of text? So this is a JSON file. It's gross and messy. I find JSON files to be a little bit easier to read if I sort of like squish them, so I can see where line breaks happen. So this is an example. This is not real election data. This is from 2018, and it was some sample data. So here it has like, so the race, let's see. The race type is a general race. The party, let's see, this is the first candidate. The party is the GOP. They got 4,040,000 votes. They got 276 electoral college votes. So this was Donald, first name, last name, Trump. Okay. And so then like I can see like, okay, this is how it's going to be laid out. So it has like, what is the race? How many votes did they get? What was the candidate's name? And then I can go down into the next line and be like, same thing. So party, number of votes, number of electoral college, candidate's first name, candidate's last name. Okay. So I can get a sense of how this is laid out just by trying to like read a line across and see how does it work. And then it's going to follow that same pattern all the way down. One of the, like, there's a lot of things about JSON that makes it hard to read, but one of the things that's nice is they put the label before each data point every single time. So yeah, all right, back to, well, let me, all right, cool. So I was gonna walk through importing some data and then trying to clean it up, trying to understand what it is, and then doing a little bit of visualization with it. So I'm gonna use this text file. I put it in the chat, but I will copy it again for the folks who have joined since I did that because I know Zoom chat is hard. So yeah, that second link there, Illinois elections. So click that, download that file to your computer. Or if you are on like, if you're on your phone with Zoom and you have a laptop over here, you can type it in by using the short link. So for the first thing that we're gonna do is import the data. If you have Sheets, I'm gonna do this first in Google Sheets. If you have Excel, you can also follow along in Excel. It's gonna be really similar. This is like the import options when you import into Excel. And this is the import options when you import into Sheets. So here it says text files separated by tabs or spaces, CSV files. So if you look at the file you just downloaded, can you tell me which way the columns are separated?
It's a tab delimited, the tab separated. There we go.
Yeah, it is. It's tab separated. So what we'll do, I'm going to go over here, sheets.new, which opens up a spreadsheet. I'm going to import.
Did you just copy and paste for the import, or is there something else you did?
I went to File and then Import.
Okay.
And then here it's saying like, tell me what file to import. So I'm going to drag and drop that text file. All right, so I have the text file name up here and it says, where do you want it? I want it to replace this spreadsheet. If you are sort of collecting a bunch of files from a bunch of different places, you could also put them sort of like at the end of the current sheet. or if you wanted to do it in like a separate tab within the same spreadsheet. Anyway, there's options. I know that this is going to be separated by a tab, so I want to say that rather than just let it detect automatically. If you know, then choose the one you know. And then I'm going to let it try to convert text to numbers, dates, and formulas. So import data. All right. Going to go back here. If when you bring something into Excel, you see these little like hash marks, this is the same in Google Sheets. That just means that the column isn't wide enough to display it. It doesn't actually mean there's anything wrong with the data. You just have to adjust your columns to be wider. So if I needed to make this wider, I could just sort of drag it to be like that. Cool. So the next one is reviewing and understanding the data. So I'm going to examine the column headers. I'm going to look for things that are blank, and I'm going to try to figure out what this data is about. So I have an ID number, an election, an office name. Vote for, I'm going to assume is like, did they have to choose one option, or did they get to choose like which of these three candidates would you like to elect to the water reclamation board or whatever. I'm not really sure what ballot group means. I don't really know what office sequence means. Candidate ID, I think, is going to be associated with the candidate. Candidate last name. Candidate affiliation commit. I don't know what that is. I'm going to turn on, let's see, the filter button, which is this little like funnel guy. Because then when I click on it, I can see like what are the options. So this isn't filled in anywhere. So I wonder if these like no, yes, are actually supposed to be over in this column. Okay, so I will probably come back to that. So I'm just going to highlight that for now to remind myself to come back to it. Counties. Cool. This looks like it's just the list of counties in Illinois. That makes sense. Votes. Party name, I don't see anything here, but when I look at the filter, it shows me that there are some party names somewhere in this column. So that's helpful. And then party abbreviation, I would expect that it's going to be the same number as before, and it does look like it's the same. So like these two columns, just because there's nothing on this first screen doesn't mean it's blank all the way down. Okay, so this looks like it's going to tell me for this office, so for this election, like for trying to decide this office, how many votes did this candidate get for this office? That's how I'm going to sort of understand what the spreadsheet is telling me. I would like to get these yes, no's out of this column because it doesn't seem like they belong there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a column to the right, insert another column to the right. Just going to give myself lots of space. Insert another column to the right. Okay. Now I'm going to click on this column. I'm going to go to data. I'm going to go down to split text to columns. I don't want it to detect automatically. I want to tell it how to separate this text into different columns. I'm going to say custom. And any place there's a space, a dash, and another space is where I want it to separate. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to look here and make sure that there's only yeses and nos. All right. And make here, check here. I'm going to search the term yes. Okay, so I got rid of all of the yeses and nos from this column and it moved them into this column. Do you guys want me to do that again? Okay, I'll go back and do it again. Okay, so I added the columns to the right. I highlighted the column that has some extra stuff in it. I went up to data. I went down to split text to columns. And then it asks down here for a separator. And I'm going to say a custom separator. And then I'm going to type in what I think is separating the data that's actually in one column from the other. So in this case, after the name, there's a space, a dash, and another space. So I'm going to go space, dash, space. And then I can see that it moved things from one column into the next. So I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm just going to use this little filter guy to make sure that I see what I expect everywhere. Cool. So it seems like this header actually should go over here. So I'm going to grab this, put it here. I can take the highlighting off now. So I'm going to pick those 3 columns, delete them, just get them back out of the way. All right. So I've cleaned up a little bit of that spreadsheet. I should also give the spreadsheet a name. I am very boring and like to just use the file name as the name for the spreadsheet, just so it's really easy in the future. If I'm wondering where this data came from, I can go back and look. All right, let's see what else it says. Looking for filters, sorting, and conditional formatting. So filters are what I used up here, these little funnel guys to see. Okay, so everything on this ballot was you vote for one. There weren't any like vote for which 3 people to put on the school board. So I'm going to hide this column because I don't really care about it. This everything is going to say general election 2018, so I don't care about that column, so I'm just going to hide it. Okay, there are different ballot groups. I don't really know what that means, but I'm going to leave it be. All right. Cool. If I wanted to know sort of what got the most votes, I would use sort. So to sort, I would go to data, sort sheet by column L, and I want to see what got the most votes. Before I do that, I'm worried that I would lose this header row, that it would get like sorted down. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to say view, freeze, 1 row. So that'll keep the top row in sheets from moving. Cool. Also going to make it bold. Cool. All right. So I want to see votes, highest to lowest. Sort sheet Z to A. Okay. So Jesse White got the most votes, and he was running for Secretary of State. So I can kind of assume he won. Mendoza got the most votes. She was running for comptroller. Actually, I can't really assume that Jesse White won or Mendoza won, because these results are only for Cook County, and those are statewide offices. So part of this is like making sure you understand what your data is for. Cool. So I can sort the data to sort of understand it. I'm going to go back to the way it was, just Control Z to see how it was organized in the first place. Conditional formatting is another thing you can do if you want to get a sense of where something might be interesting in your data set. So let's say I want to do format conditional formatting. And I want to say if the number So if the number of votes was less than 70, then I want it to highlight in red. Like, did anybody get almost no votes? I can just sort of easily scroll through and be like, oh, yep, this person only got 1 vote. I could also do this just by sorting, but sometimes if you are doing something else and you don't want to sort it to be able to see this kind of information, you can use conditional formatting. So I can sort of see here that these are like Green Party candidates that got a low number of votes. This person wasn't affiliated with any party, which might be why they got a low number of votes. So that's how you can use sort of conditional formatting to help you understand what the data is. Okay. So let's say we wanted to actually understand like who won some of the races in this data set. For that, I'm going to use pivot tables. So I'm going to clear off this conditional formatting. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so I'm going to select the whole sheet just by clicking on this little square in the top corner that highlights everything. I'm going to go to Data, Pivot Table, Create Pivot Table, and then I'm going to say put it in a new sheet. Okay. I'm going to put together one pivot table, and then we can make like a bunch of pivot tables. We can sort of like explore lots of different ways that we can do this. Say I want the row to be the office name and the value to be the candidate last name. Okay, so this gives me a sense of how many people were running in each of these races. So it's looking at anywhere where this shows up, how many different last names are there? Actually, I wanted to count unique. There we go. Much better. So count was showing it every time any part of like the name showed up, but count unique is how many different names show up. So this tells me how many people were running in each of these races. And let's see, format, conditional formatting. Let's see, if it is greater than 2, I want it to highlight. Okay, so without even like sorting, I can get a sense of like where were there some races where there were more than 2 people on the ballot. Cool. So that's one example of a pivot table. Let's go ahead and do another one. Data, pivot table, new sheet. For rows, let's see, I want to know candidate last name, the number of votes they got, what party affiliation they have, and I only want to see it for people who were running for Secretary of State. Oops. Okay, so now this has sorted it down, so it's just showing me what were the last names of candidates running for the Secretary of State, how many votes did they get, and let's see, I don't want the sum of the party name. I want it to actually show me the party name. Let's see if I move that up into column. Sure, that works. It's not perfect, but I can see this person was a Libertarian candidate. This is how many votes they got. This person was a Republican candidate. This is how many votes they got. I guess I could also move party name next to last name. Yeah, there we go. That's easier to read. So this is a way that I can sort of see the total number of votes that a candidate got in a specific race. So to use this, I set what rows I wanted, what values I was interested in, and then I used this filters to get it to show me only the stuff I was interested in. If I take off the filter, it's going to get really messy. It's just going to be angry at me, actually. There we go. And it's going to sort of show all of the information like this. Cool. Does anybody have a suggestion for another view that we could do for this pivot table? Let's see, let's go back and look at the main spreadsheet. What if I'm curious about how many, so it looks like these are judges. We're voting whether to retain them on the circuit court. And I want to see how many votes there were across all of the judges for keeping the judges versus not keeping the judges. So let's see. I want to know yes or no. And is that the name of the column that I wanted? Yes. Okay. And then I want to add a column for, actually I want to add values. I want to know how many votes there were. Okay, so these were the races where it wasn't a judge race. So let me actually add a filter. I want to filter office name. I want it to say, let's see, I want it to include the word appellate. Clear, select all, okay. Oh, no, that didn't work. Maybe retain. Select all, okay. Okay, now it's only showing me the races where there was a question of, do we retain this candidate or not? So I can see that overall, people voted a lot more to retain the judges than they did to not retain the judges. So is that helpful in sort of showing how you can like summarize this data in different ways? Any other thing that you thought it might be interesting to look at in this data?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So I don't know if I'm jumping too far ahead, but when you did under conditional format rules and you had highlighted some of the data, is there an option to do that in Excel as well?
There is.
Okay.
Yes. If we are good with this data set, I can go ahead and work through an Excel example. Cool. Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing while I get Excel open. Okay, so I just opened an example from an earlier slide. Yeah. Okay, so I'm using the Excel file that's here. In case you feel compelled to follow along. So, share screen, Microsoft Excel. Okay, so this is the results that I downloaded from the Minnesota Secretary of State's website for the 2016 election results by precinct. So the first thing I do is I sort of look at these column names. There's a lot here that I don't understand what it means. So I'm gonna look and see, did this come with some helpful guidance? And it did. They have little tabs down here that help you understand what the headers mean, which is really nice. And some states are really good at this. So let's see. I want to know, like, what is McD name? So I come over here, I look, come down, find McD name. Oh, it's the name of the municipality or unorganized territory. Got it. Go back and look at the results, try to figure out another one. I assume that's congressional district, state senate district, state legislative district, city comm district, county commissioner district. I guessed wrong. This is why it's helpful to have this. So I can see there's all of these different categories. I can get a sense, was this mail-in ballots, not mail-in ballots? There's just so much data here. So looking again at the fields, I can get a sense. So the number of registered voters as of 7 a.m. on election day. Let me actually make this much bigger because it's very hard to read, I know, over Zoom. There we go. So the number of voters who are registered as of 7 a.m., the number of people who registered during the day on election day. So those might be two interesting things to look at. And like which precincts had the most people register to vote on election day. So I'm gonna go back. Well, I'm kind of curious, what are in these other tabs? Okay, so these are the county names. And then if I wanted to put this on a map, I would want to know the FIPS code. The FIPS code is just like a code that you can use to connect it to map. So here's the FIPS code. Aha, districts. So there's lots of different, some states have districts and that vote on specific things together, which are different than counties and different than municipalities. So this is sort of talking me through. These are the counties where the supervisors are elected by district and not countywide. These have 2 people on the district. Like this is just really helpful information if I'm like trying to understand this race for the first time. So you could also go back and look at this kind of old data for any races that you might be following this time to see if it has all these helpful notes. And then there's another note here, which is good. It just says that like, this is when these election results were certified. There was a recount. So here's when the recount results were certified. Here's who certifies it. And then it looks like they went back into this file and updated some stuff in April of 2017. So it was really nice of them to include all this information in that one download. Cool. So I'm back here. I see Excel keeps giving me these little like warnings, and I'm not sure what they're about. So I want to click on it and find out. It says numbers stored as text. I would actually prefer that these numbers get stored as text because there's no reason I would ever want to add together the precinct codes because those don't actually have value. So it's fine that those are stored as text. When we get into something like number of votes, like I want to make sure that these are stored as numbers. So if I want to see what kind of format they're stored into, Usually it shows on the home, but sometimes, oh yeah, here it shows general. I could also just sort of highlight this column, deselect, yeah, highlight this column and say, this is numbers. And it might, you know, add decimal points or things like that, but now Excel knows that those are numbers. We had talked about conditional formatting. I'm going to make sure that it knows that these are numbers too. So let's say I wanted to highlight any precinct where more than 50 people registered to vote on election day, because EDR is election day registrations, right? Let's go back. Number of voters registering when they vote. Yeah. Okay. Data. Let's see. Okay, so if you go up to format in the actual, like the bar that's above the Excel bar, you can go to format, conditional formatting. Let's see. I want to add a rule, so I'm going to click the little plus. And I want to say, let's see. This is interesting. So I could say format only values that are above or below average. I just want to see the ones that are above average and I want them to be green. Sure. So like which places had above average? Click OK. Click OK. Let's see. Aha, down here. So now I can get a sense of here are some that were above average. You can also do it not just for numbers, you can do it for text as well. The text in this is not super interesting. Let's say I just wanted to highlight, well, yeah, text here is kind of boring. All right. But yeah, you can do conditional formatting on text as well. So format, conditional formatting. Add new rule. Only cells that contain the word unorganized. Okay. All right. So then I went through and highlighted anything that had the word unorganized, even if it wasn't at the beginning. So this is something that you couldn't do with sort. You could do it with filter, or you can just do it with conditional formatting. All right. Cool.
So would you say, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, would you say that the conditional formatting is an alternative to filter, but they're, you could use either one, they do the same in a different way?
Yeah, they do the same thing in a different way. I like filter because it shows me like how many options there were total. Okay. So something like how many different tabulation systems there were. Like I can click filter and it'll show me and I'm like, oh, okay, there were only basically 3 different kinds of filters that they used. Whereas like conditional formatting, it would be harder to judge that. Okay. But filtering does work if I only wanted to look at the things that were hand counted. I could either do conditional formatting, search for the word hand, or I could do filter and show just the ones with hand. Okay.
I have a real quick question about like what a data journalist like in a newsroom would do with when they're working with data on a spreadsheet. So do they typically, just, future wise, do they typically kind of almost always combine filtering and conditional formatting together to sort of like analyze and identify like trends or patterns within a data for stories?
I mean, this first step of just like looking for things that are interesting, everybody just, it's sort of like whatever you're comfortable with. When it gets into like you're actually going to do something with this, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is really replicable so that another editor or another journalist could double check your numbers for you. And so actually that's one of my next slides. Let me hop back because it would be good to go over that before I get too far. All right, screen. Okay. So when you're cleaning up data, when you're trying to make it so that you can actually pull something publishable out of it, you want to keep a data diary of any changes you make. So if you're going to filter it down, especially if you're going to delete anything, you want to make sure you write down what you delete. You want to write down. So when we did that like split text to column, like I would want to write down each step that I took for that. Like I split text to column based on space dash space and put the new column under this heading. So that I can like trace everything that I'm doing so that somebody else could follow and do the exact same thing and get the exact same results. So these are the kinds of things that I would be doing. So removing unnecessary headers, splitting the columns if it's two columns switch together. You also may need to combine columns. You may have like a day field and a month, a day and a month field, but you want to put them together so you have the date in one column. So you may need to combine columns. So if you do that, that's another thing you'll want to write down. Anytime you edit typos, you're going to want to say like, I fixed, like there were 13 cells that had Florida spelled wrong, and I adjusted them. So in terms of what people are actually likely to be doing in a newsroom, some people are going to be using Excel. Some people are going to be using R, which is a language that people use for understanding data. And that plays really nicely with Excel spreadsheets and CSVs and JSON and all of that. I think most often, instead of using filtering or instead of using conditional formatting, I would just be playing in a pivot table. So I'd go tools, data, summarize with pivot table, select the whole thing. And then this is where I would sort of be doing a lot of the like investigating what would be interesting in this data. And then once I find something, I can sort of write down like, this is what I made my column, this is what I made my row. So we wanted to look at the number of people who registered at 7 a.m. versus registered day of. And we wanted to separate that out based on precinct name. Okay, cool. So now I have all of my precinct names, how many people were registered as of 7 a.m. and how many people registered day of. So let's say I want to look in here and figure out which precinct had the highest like proportion of people register day of. And I'll zoom in.
Quick question about the
Yep.
7 a.m. thing.
Mhm.
Is that typically like a cutoff or like the starting hour of the day of election day? Like whatever happened before 7 a.m. is kind of yesterday?
I think it depends on what time the polls open. So my guess is that Minnesota opens at 7 a.m. Because they have, a lot of them have like electronic logbooks that have a list of all of the voters, whether they've early voted, whether they've been mailed a mail-in ballot. So that way, when somebody comes to vote, the person who checks them in can say, oh, it looks like you already voted.
Okay.
Or, oh, it looks like you haven't voted yet. Welcome, here's your ballot. And so I think those electronic logbooks that they keep, that's where I would suspect this column is pulling from, which is like how many people were registered to vote as of when we created that. They used to be like printed out reams of paper, but now they're essentially iPads. Yeah. So I'm gonna see, let's see, I wanna divide the number of people divided by the, okay. So what I did is I put in a formula. I used the equal sign. I clicked on a cell that I wanted it to pull from, so C4, and then I wanted it to divide by the number that was in B4. So this is the formula I used, C4 divided by B4. And so when I put that into this column, this is the number it gave me. I know that this, I want it to be a percent, so I'm gonna click on the percent. So 8% of people, or like 8%. How do I? Let me actually, let's see. Let's add these together first. So I want to take this number plus this number. That's not a percent anymore. It's just a number. Okay, so I know there were 103 voters, or 143 voters. And now I want to see how many of those 143 were people who registered on election day. So I'm going to take 10, the C4 divided by D4. All right. Okay, so 7% of the people who voted on election day registered on election day in this precinct. So I want to repeat that for everything. So I'm going to hover so I can get this little X. Instead of getting the hand symbol, I want the little X, and I want it to be filled in black. And then I click on the bottom corner and I double click. And that didn't work. Nope. Okay. Grab the little X, drag it down. This is still not working. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. So sometimes if you put the dollar signs in front of the information that you're trying to add together, okay, so I want it to keep the C, but I want it to change. There we go. Okay. So what I ended up doing for the formula here, I'm gonna set it over here so you can see it. Is I put a dollar sign ahead of the C and ahead of the B, and that tells Excel to not change from the C column or the B column. But because I didn't put the dollar sign in front of the fives, it knows that it can adjust that as I drag it down onto different rows. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to make sure that these numbers make sense. 61 plus 60 plus 6 equals 67. Okay. So now if I double click, it should just apply that formula all the way down. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Let's see what happens if I do it. Okay. Let's pick a number and see if it makes sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense either. Okay. All right, let's see. So I want C4 divided by D4. Yes, these numbers make more sense when I'm sort of like looking at it, like they're all about in the same range. Now that I know that this looks good, I'm going to double click on the thing. It's going to drag it all the way down. That takes it all the way down into the first blank row. So this is one of those places where if you had blank rows in your data, you would want to make sure that you clear those out or you sort so that it's not only doing this for half of your data. So I can scroll. I want to make sure it goes all the way down. I'm seeing some errors here where there were zeros. That totally makes sense. There's just a ton of data here. All right. So 10% of all of the voters registered on election day. That's really interesting. Cool. All right. So let's say I wanted to figure out which of these is the highest. Just to make it easy, I'm going to copy and paste this out of the pivot table just because pivot tables aren't sortable. So I'm going to collect all this data that I just put together. I'm going to put it into a new sheet just for easy access. Right. Oops. Okay, there we go. So this is total registered, and this is percent who registered on election day. And this column over here is the precinct names. Cool. Precinct names. Right. I want to freeze the top row so that when I sort, it doesn't get lost. So to do that, I went to View, Window, Freeze Top Row. And now I know when I do other things like filter or sort. So if I wanted to sort this, I want to sort by, click OK. Oh, I need to choose. My Zoom window is in the way. There we go. So I want to sort by percent who registered on election day. I want to see largest to smallest. Okay. So it's going to, all the ones that it gave me errors for are going to go first. Okay, so Rogers Point had one person vote and that one person registered on election day. That's interesting. I want to know that guy's story. And the ballot workers story for that place. So this is one of those places where you're like, huh, I wonder what happened in these areas. But I can also see sort of where all of this is. Like, say I want to graph this. I don't care about these ones that divide by 0 for this graph. So I'm going to get rid of those. Delete. Okay. Highlight. Let's go. Oops. Insert chart. Let's do a bar chart. Just a very simple. Oh, Maximum number of data series is 255. Too much data. All right. Scatter plot. That seems weird. Let's see what it does. Okay, too much data. Got it. Let's say I wanted to group this together. So I want to know how many places had 30% or more, how many places had 20% or more. So I'm going to make a pivot table of this pivot table. Yeah. Data. Summarize the pivot table. All right. Percent who registered on election day. Maybe another pivot table isn't the best option here. Okay. Giving up on that, going back. So you could also do this manually. So it's like, I wanted to know how many places had 30 to 39%. I can highlight, be like, okay, down here at the bottom, it says there were 10. So I know 10 places had 30 to 39%. So over here, I'm going to make a new table. We're going to say 50 to 59%. I see that there are 6. 40 to 49%. I can see that there's 1. 30 to 39%. You can see that there's 10. 20 to 29%. This is where I might use filtering. Let's see. Filter. Between, no, between, let's see, 20. Aha, yeah, greater than or equal to 20, less than or equal to 29. Okay, that was weird. Aha, I needed or instead of and. No, that's still weird. Anyway, okay, so I can go through, do this. I know we're sort of running short on time. 20 to 29. Okay, so there's 41 precincts. 10 to 19%. Yeah, this is one of the things where you're like, there's probably a faster way to do this if I knew how to do it, but it may be faster for me to just do it the way I know how rather than try to learn something spur of the moment. All right. So 1,543 places had that. And let's see. This is going to be everything else. $24.27. Okay. So that could be an interesting story. You could be like, hey, let's figure out what happened in like these 17 places. Let's look at them. Let's see, do they have anything in common? Were they all really small? Were they all really big? Are they all located in the same part of the state? So you can sort of see like this could tip you off to where something interesting might be going on. Cool. So that's one way that you can sort of play with data in Excel. I'm going to stop sharing. Well, I want to make a chart just because it would be nice to make a chart in this process. So insert, bar graph. Yep, I can see almost everybody, almost all of the places only had, you know, less than 20% of the people who voted register on election day. Stop share. Cool. So we have sort of gone through all of my slides. We talked about cleaning data. Here are some other things that we covered. Conditional formatting. You just go insert chart and click until you can get a chart. Vlookup is really fascinating. It's when you can connect something that's in one tab of your spreadsheet to something that's in another tab of your spreadsheet. And I literally just Google how to do it every time I need to do it. So, and then I have links down here to a couple of resources that are just like really good guides about data journalism in general and how to handle data. And so in the Google Sheets or Google Slides link, you'll be able to like follow these links. Any last questions? You can also just tweet at me if you think of questions or DM me or email me. I also use email like an old person. And I have like one fun fact to send you off with, which is that, you know how on election maps, there's like red states and blue states. So like that wasn't a thing. Like there wasn't agreement about which party was red and which party was blue until almost the year 2000. And so it was like between 1996 and the year 2000 that the New York Times visual graphics editor like finally like made the decision. He's like, from here on out, we're always going to do it the same way. And Republican starts with R and red starts with R. And so that's why I'm making Republicans red and that's why I'm making Democrats blue. Because before that, it used to like switch, like there was no agreement. And so some places did it one way and some places did it the other way. So it used to be that like blue meant Republican and red meant Democrat. And it wasn't until 2000 because that was when newspapers started printing full page color graphics, because before that newspapers pretty much only did photos in color. And even before that, it was mostly everything was in black and white. So they didn't really need to have agreement. But then, yeah. So anyway, that's what, so red state and blue state is like a totally made up thing because those are the colors that a graphics editor once chose.
How soon after that editor made that decision did everyone else start following?
So he made the decision like while the New York Times was working on the 1996 presidential election. And then by the time the 2000 election happened, everybody was in agreement. And so because the 2000 election like dragged out because it was like contested for so long, like so many people saw the election maps that hadn't necessarily paid attention before, that's when it like cemented into everybody's mind. So yeah. Anyway, that was my fun fact for the day. Cool. Do you guys have any other questions or anything else that you were hoping to learn that you didn't get covered today?
I have a question real quick about you mentioned earlier that JSON's mainly kind of for like kind of real time, like pulling the data from precincts, and I'm wondering, is there a difference since it's a very rural in a majority of the lands, since my newsroom only covers in Indian country or indigenous issues, and if I were looking at results and precincts or the area on reservations, would I be able to find like a lifetime like update, or would that just be
It'll probably be, it's going to be the same kind of system that everyone across the country is using, because most places really do use phone calls. Like, I know it seems bonkers, but like most places literally call their voting results into their central office. Some of them fax it. And it's only once it gets to that central office that it starts to be put into a more computer friendly format. But the Associated Press and a couple of other places that do election results for every precinct, like they're the ones who like put it out more widely. They're the ones who would then take that information and format it into a JSON.
Okay.
So even if it like went from phone call to fax machine at the start, by the time it gets to the newsroom, it may be in a JSON format.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, they really try to make sure that the election reporting process does not rely on like wireless access or phone signal. They try to make sure that there are landlines. In Iowa during the primaries, they didn't do a good job of that. They were using this app that was really poorly developed, and then people didn't have signal. And so most election officials for this election have tried to make sure that they have a lot of non-digital ways to report the results.
You end up like finding an interesting result from using data that you found, and then you end up having a story that includes a piece of that. Would you ever want to like link back to the original data source? Is that like a good practice, or is that something you wouldn't necessarily need to do?
I say that it's always good to link to sources as much as you can. I think it could also be helpful instead, if you feel like it's weird to stick it into the story, you could do a methodology box at the end of a story, or as like a sidebar that says like, here's how we reported the story. If you want to find something on your own that's interesting in this data, here's where you can do it.